You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Call the meeting to order at 7:04. This be our locals. We're going to start on the end. Would you mind leading us in the pledge? You're in the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Campos, would you like to call roll?
Trustee Burdall.
Here.
Trustee Doggett.
Here.
Trustee Levin.
Here.
Trustee Villalobos.
Here.
Thank you.
The district digitally records the audio portion of the meetings. The recorder is located in front of the board scribe. All recordings are kept in the superintendent's office for 30 days and are available during that time period for inspection by members of the public on district equipment without charge. As a community service, Pacifica Community Television, PCT, records and broadcasts meetings. The board met in closed session regarding conference with labor negotiator, agency negotiator, CSEA and LSEA. Also conference with legal counsel, discussing anticipated litigation, and the superintendent's public employee performance evaluation. Direction was given with respect to the anticipated litigation. Okay. Approval of the minutes of December, it looks like that must have been the 17th, right? It's cut
December
off.
11th.
It's 11th? Okay. Oh, there it is. So are there any questions regarding the minutes of December 11th? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for December 11th?
A motion to approve the minutes on December 11th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Board passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay. Item 8, approval of the agenda and consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be approved with one motion, which is not debatable and which requires a unanimous vote for passage. If any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests, any item shall be removed from this section and placed in the regular order of business following approval of the consent agenda.
I would just point out, before you make the vote, is that the personnel changes reflect two big changes. One is Ms. Scavitti's resignation and on June 30th, and the second one, which is a little bit more time sensitive, which is Barbara Ings becoming the interim principal when Julie Torrego Carrillo goes on maternity leave.
So, no other changes? Okay, so let's vote on this. Do I have a motion to approve the
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Board passes 4-0. Thank you.
Item 9, communications. Speakers wishing to address the board on items on the agenda or not on the agenda may complete speaker cards and submit them to any member at the staff table. If you are addressing the board on a non-agenda item, please be aware that the provisions of the Brown Act prohibit the board from acting or discussing such matters at this meeting. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic. 9A, LSEA.
Nothing at this time.
CSEA. Take that as nothing. Okay, people wishing to address the board. Do we have any yellow slips? No?
No,
All right, correspondence.
I have none.
Board superintendent communications. Who would like to start?
I can start. I was on vacation a couple times, but sometimes my job meshes with what we do here. And I went to a professional development, and it was about meditation in the classroom, and trying to keep our children who have traumatic experiences calm and de-escalating the situations. And there's actually one elementary school in my district that is doing 10 minutes of meditation before school. So the way he presented, just it made a lot of like we were all calm from our meditation, and then bam, all of a sudden, he yelled and, interrupted our peace and quiet. So it just showed, how you can get yourself there, and then something can happen, and then that ruins the atmosphere. So, I don't know how many teachers are actually practicing something in the classrooms, but, I probably would assume that there's a few. And so that's just something, that I wanted to share, and that I do see the benefits of alternatives, to de-escalating situations. But pretty much that was it. And then I was going to go to a PTO meeting, but with Ocean Shore flooding, that didn't happen.
I think Sunset Ridge practices mindfulness.
Yes, mindfulness.
So I really liked that when my daughter was there, and so I agree with you on that. I don't have any official things that I've done over the past month because of the holiday, but I did attend Spark Poetry's Battle of the Beach, and Ingrid B. Lacey won that night, their team won. And then I also chaperoned field trip, the 6th grade field trip, which was a lot of fun, to the California Academy of Sciences. So that's pretty much all I've done so far.
Okay. I attended a parcel tax committee meeting that is just once a year, and they're going to report out, I believe, at the next meeting. And went to a legislative action day. Heather also went the other Saturday, and it was to meet with Kevin Mullen, Jerry Hill, and Mark Berman. And so we got to talk to them in small groups about the different concerns with the schools, and they know
The need for funding.
They know that, yeah, same subjects usually every time. And then we also got to meet with the state senate candidates, because Jerry Hill's turned out. And so there are several people running for his spot. So we got to meet them in a smaller group also, ask some questions and have a round table with them. And then, hasn't happened yet, but this Saturday is January Jazz. So anybody wants to come support the band, come to the Moose Lodge. 4 o'clock is the matinee with the student jazz bands from Cabrillo, Valamar, IBL, Ocean Shore, and Terra Nova. And then in the evening, we have different adult jazz groups in the evening, so with the dinner and 21 and older evening. So.
Highly recommend. Highly recommend. I have very, very little. Prior to the break, went to Cabrillo's holiday performance. My kids were already on vacation at that time, so I didn't get to see them, but I showed up anyway and pretended that I took a video and sent it to them and said, look at what you missed. And then I think that's all I have for now. I guess the only other thing that I did right before the break, which isn't necessarily PSD, but one of our partners, I went to Spindrift to see The Little Mermaid. And I suggest everybody go and try to support. I mean, it's amazing what the kids do in a very, very short amount of time. A few months, they have a production up and running. So that was really good. And I think we're actually going to vote, or maybe that was in the consent agenda already today. We already voted on that, but renewed our partnership with Spindrift. So that's all I have.
So I have been spending a lot of time at Ocean Shore, and so one never says great disaster, but honestly, today at IBL, the combination of having a place to go and IBL opening their arms. When we got off the bus, there was a student with two IBL students with signs, "Welcome Ocean Shore." Students moved quickly into the gymnasium. The upper grade, the 6th through 8th grade students were in classrooms, and the elementary schools, they all fit in some corner. That's a huge gym. Like I thought it would be too loud, and they all fit in they had circle space, and they had arts, and they had music, and it was a great day, and now they're prepared for 2 days of field trips. And it was, I think, the best one could make of a very challenging situation, and I just applaud everyone from our maintenance and operations staff who were out there the minute it started to the entire Ocean Shore staff, the entire Ocean Shore families. The kids were excited today, and while it's different and you don't know what to expect, I just absolutely applaud them for their pulling together and making the best of a challenging situation. So excited to look at the changes that are going to be made at Ocean Shore. They'll have mostly new carpet and paint on the wall, and pretty extensive, how do I just say it, that, both cleaning and refurbishing the materials that are in there. So after we come back to school, there'll still be some construction that happens. Many families are still without their backpacks. We don't have access to their backpacks. They're secure, but they are locked away. And, we tell them that we're sorry we can't get to their backpack, and people are incredibly understanding. So it's really nice for people to understand that while that was an emergency, that it's a loss of property and not a loss of life, or no one got hurt. And I really do appreciate the spirit that the folks at Ocean Shore are dealing with this challenging situation.
I just want to say that the communication that I got as well instilled a lot of confidence that the situation was under control. And of course, I was putting my 2 cents in, but I think you were already 10 steps ahead of anything that I suggested. So,
I also, Julie Tarango and Siva Steele and their leadership team are, several people walked into the gym and saw the classes working today, and they said, "That is so Ocean Shore." It just was. And so it was a big win in a hard situation.
Nice. Okay, moving on. We have item 10, a presentation from Christy Novak.
Okay, so I will introduce this one. You can go stand up, ma'am. Trustee Levin has so patiently waited for this presentation, has been asking for this one several times, and but he's not the only one that's asked for this, is that when people understand that our students' curriculum is often delivered through technology and the assessment happens through technology, they feel that a certain number of our students don't have access at home, are at a disadvantage. And so Christy Novak is our Access, Equity, and Innovation Specialist, and she is here to give us a very brief presentation on student digital access at home.
Great, thank you. So I have 10 minutes, and I do have quite a bit of information, so I am going to go through it, and please ask any questions at the end. Oh, is this not on, or? Oh.
There we go.
So we're going to start by defining what the digital divide actually means. So basically, a digital divide is defined as a gap between those who have knowledge of technology skills and access to devices and those who do not. Oh, you're doing it.
Yeah.
So common barriers, these are common barriers that have been identified in general when we talk about the digital divide. Geographical barriers are one of them. So examples include if you live in rural areas of the country that internet providers have a hard time getting to, or it's just geographically challenging. We could say in Pacifica, we are over the hill. We are not necessarily without access given where we are in the region of California, but that would be an example. We are more prone to some natural disasters than over the hill. Our more challenge would be financial for our families. So providing food, shelter, clothing for children is a priority over internet access. So if that is the choices that need to be made, then those are the choices that are made. Another factor also can be within a household, the number of devices that are in the house. So if there's a family of 5 and there's one computer, that can be logistically challenging because most of the time the adult is going to have that device. Next. So, going to give you some historical background while you absorb this, this slide. So, we've actually worked in the past on internet access a couple of years ago with the previous superintendent. It was a project that I was actively involved in. And so we were talking about how do we bring access to the students that didn't have it. So we did legwork, I did research on how we might be able to provide those services, we did the cost. Then we found out we did not necessarily have the data to actually know how many students in the district were without internet access. And this is common across many districts, that this is not necessarily collected. So we attempted, long story short, to collect the data in certain ways. It was complicated and convoluted and not what I would say the most successful, but the idea was at the time to still start with 10 devices with hotspots. I believe we were going to focus on IBL and push that out. At the last minute, that was actually put on hold, that project. So I just wanted to give you that context. Out of finding out that we did not have the ability to collect data, we ended up putting on the registration form, when parents register, there's a checkbox that says, no internet access, no response. So this is currently the data that you're looking at is as a result of those checkboxes. 2 variables. If they choose to not answer or check the box, right, we don't know. Second variable would be if they lose internet middle of the year after they register, we don't necessarily know that. So just wanted to give you that understanding of where these numbers came from. So that being said, we currently, based on our data, we have 57 students, 50 families that have identified as not having internet access at home. And I also want to reiterate or kind of clarify that a smartphone is not defined as having internet access. I think a lot of people sometimes will feel that, oh, I have a smartphone, I can get connected via Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. That is not how such data is collected, because you are very limited on what you're able to do on a smartphone. So just wanted to clarify that. So I did a little breakdown too, just out of curiosity as well. But we have 31 of those students are identified currently as English language learners. 19 of those students are families who are identified as socioeconomically disadvantaged. And we also have, out of those, 13 who are a combination of those. Next. So this is another way to just look at the data. 0 represents TK. So we have TK to 2 is represented in blue, and the delightful fuchsia that is very bright on that screen is 3 through 8th grade. So just kind of absorbing where that currently lies. So how does this impact a student or a family? So on the left, these are examples of how people are actively using the internet and using computers as devices. So for us, I'm going to highlight the fact homework, right? We talk about homework a lot. I saw a stat on Pew Research about how 70% of teachers nationwide tend to give online homework. 50% of students don't necessarily have the access, but we have more and more need to give students online opportunities. They do have to take assessments as well. So being able to practice on that, if they're not able to do that on their own outside of school, they are already at a disadvantage when they're taking a test. So then that turns into, right, over time, you can see on the right some of the results over time of what can happen. So this can affect opportunities for higher education. This can affect whether or not a student ends up dropping out of high school. And the last two relate to each other. So higher rate debt over time is that ability to be able to successfully generate enough income, right, in a competitive society. So then you need to take out more loans, and then the cycle continues. Other things that affect families include the fact that everything is now online. When you have to do an application, whether it's for college, whether it's for services, whether it's to get grant, anything, right? It's all online. So if a family does not have the skills or the background or the access to do that, this is a large barrier that can cause and continue a cycle of creating that digital divide. Next. So what can we do? So there are, this is an example of a nonprofit that is out there, the California Emerging Technology Fund. This came out as a result of an agreement with California Public Utilities Commission and the large internet companies that liked to merge. And so the agreement was that over a 5-year period, they needed to provide $60 million to this nonprofit, and their explicit goal and mission is to help create access, help people that are usually underserved or unserved in certain communities to get online and to get the training that they need. So there's a wealth of information and resources on the site. Some of the highlights include how you can find access by zip code, digital literacy training for families. They do have also, in addition to English and Spanish resources, they now have tabs that include Chinese and Korean. I was at a meeting at the county office. We also mentioned how Arabic would be a wonderful addition as to that. The other caveat that I do want to mention on this is, even though this is here and there are low-cost options now for pretty much all internet providers, the second barrier, which I brought up at the meeting, is the idea that you do have to show proof of residency and you do have to show proof that you qualify. So for those who might be undocumented, this is a fear factor and it's very real. They feel like, well, I'm not going to do this, the government is going to track me. So part of our charge and part of that education to our community would be, this is okay. You will not be, if you do this, the government is not going to know anything, right? So that's just part of that messaging, and it's also just part of creating that comfortability with families in general when they have to show such documents. Next. Oh, great. So any questions or discussion points? I know I was pretty fast. I just wanted to make sure I got through in the time allotted.
Well, the 57 students, that's this year.
Correct.
Okay.
That was just really only one question, and that was a yes, no, right? So it doesn't go into number of devices, it doesn't go into speed of your connection or bandwidth or anything like that. So I was actually surprised. That was a smaller number than I expected, which I like, but it's still about those 50 kids. What are we doing for them?
And I would just like to also just add that based on what I told you with regard to the variables and based on what I kind of understand and know, I would suspect the number is actually higher. I would not guess how much higher, but
Sure.
I would definitely say that number is higher than 57. And to your point, yes, we don't have the ability to collect those subset kind of questions.
But so what additional support, I mean, my question was, what additional support might we be able to provide those 50 students or their families?
I might encourage the conversation, the reopening of what we were trying to achieve originally in the past, with the idea of starting the idea of working with an organization, say like Khajiit is one of many or several, that you can get a hotspot for a reasonable price. They usually do sets of 10. We would provide the device, and then we could consider the idea of a loan system through the school, right, or a library situation, or just directly to the student. Obviously, agreements would be, made with that as well. And there are certain things that a district has to consider with regards to security and privacy, and there are ways that you can set up the computer for that. But that is a conversation, and that's information that can definitely be shared with you about also what other districts or how they're trying to approach that.
I was just also thinking in my head, what if I have a student that has homework that has to be done online? Additional hours at school, after school, that they have access to to the internet?
Absolutely. I mean, our teachers definitely care about our students, and often, based on what I would understand, is either an alternative assignment or the ability to give them access after school or in some fashion. We also try and promote the libraries, but
As I say, I think the Pacifica libraries have hotspots and devices that they can check out.
They do. And so that was also another
probably a waiting list,
investigation point. When I talked with the public library, when I was working on this project, they told me that they are quite popular, and they get reserved quite quickly with anybody in the community. So I think that competition in itself would be a bit problematic versus if we wanted something consistent.
Wasn't the city looking into hotspots in the city of Pacifica that would be free
So
hotspots?
in the past, and part of the, in the past, the San Mateo County office, what they ended up doing is, through whatever funding or something, they identified the coast side communities were a bit more challenged with the idea of accessing Wi-Fi and having internet access. And so they put in, throughout Pacifica, in a couple of locations, and the district was involved in that conversation, the previous superintendent, and IT was likely also involved in that, about recommendations of where. So I know that one was placed near a certain apartment complex, and maybe near a park, but again, I don't know if that really solves the situation, because even if there is Wi-Fi that's free, we don't have the device. And so, I mean, I think it is a conversation worth having. Yes.
The first one is, did we offer the questionnaire in Spanish?
So I don't know if currently our registration is in Spanish.
It is.
Okay. So that's, again, our only means of collecting that information.
The other thing too is I was just wondering, we have a collaboration with Pacifica Resource Center. And I know one of the services, when I used to work there, was trying to help the clients get internet. And so, do they have any resources maybe that they could help with?
So why don't we look into that? I think that would be one helpful piece to look into that. There's also, through that ETC, is low cost internet that a family could take on. It's about $10 a month. The cost of a Chromebook is really $300, and it's not much, and they're pretty durable. You can drop them, and so we could purchase for some of our schools with a higher level with a higher number of students. We could purchase more Chromebooks and have them in checkout from the library. Like, so maybe at the beginning of the year you would check out a Chromebook, and then at the end of the year, or I think people that do the Chromebook loaners, you want to consider what kids would use over the summer as well. But we could look at, the device is not hard for us to get our hands on. We're challenged because we don't currently provide many devices in K2, so we've got to work on our plan in general, but the device is a small hurdle. It's the ongoing internet, but it's $10 a month, which...
Well, I'm very concerned because when I'm looking at this, it's over half from 3rd grade to 8th grade who don't have internet. My daughter has had to turn in work from 3rd grade in Google Classroom, and she's in the 6th grade now, and it's almost all the homework is online. So it's very concerning that there are kids out here who don't have access. And you were saying the hotspots, we could buy it in the district. How much is that? Like,
So I'd have to relook at the figures because I did this work over a year ago or 2 years ago with regards to the cost when we were doing the package of 10. But again, we were looking at a company called Kajit out of a couple of the other companies, and overall it was what we felt pretty affordable with those. Their goal is to help us. Like they're not in it for the money. They are in it to help with access. And so I would have to relook at those figures, and I could get those to you.
because like a combination of if you don't have internet access and you don't have a device,
Yeah.
if we give you the Chromebook and the hotspot for homework, because it's all online. Like we have students right now who are struggling to
So
do it.
in general, no assignment should be exclusively online.
Yeah.
However, if you're the kid, you want to do it online, right? So this can be one of our goals or our actions and services that we do in our LCAP. We can spend supplemental money on unduplicated students to provide those services.
Yeah.
I think this can be part of our technology plan as we move forward. It's not, the number is extremely manageable. And I think based on the discussion that I've heard, it is such a factor in students' learning that we will want to do something like that.
Is it something that the parcel tax, maybe an excess on the parcel tax could be
actually,
put towards something like that?
That might be a good idea.
Because there's a little cushion in the
There's a little bit of little cushion in the
parcel
parcel tax, yeah.
tax.
It would be really easy too to catalog this in the library with the barcodes and the child's name and account.
There are some districts that do this kind of carte blanche. It's like every student gets a Chromebook, and I don't think that we're in that position at this point, but I think with a small enough number, we can look at, well, we want to make sure, I mean, there are some kids that can't have to decide which device to use, right? So which one of my 3 devices should I use? So we just want to make sure everyone has access to something. And sometimes with families, if there's a family of 5 and one student's in high schooler, well, then the 4th grader's not ever going to have access to that. So we want to make sure that the device is available as well. So, any other questions for Christy before we?
This is really important, so I'm just wondering, when are we going to follow up with your presentation?
I am more than happy to get you some information on quotes as soon as possible.
I think before we look at full-on quotes, what I
Yeah.
would like us to do is explore some of the options that you talked about. So one is in our joint articulation meeting, we could ask Kevin Woodhouse what the city plan is. I can email him beforehand. And then looking at PRC, and then we could bring back a couple of scenarios before we go on to full-on quotes.
There are some factors to consider when you're rolling something like this out, so it's just a matter of what would work best for us.
Anything else?
No, I mean, thank you so much for this
Sure.
presentation. And I also really like the ACT report that you provided as a resource. So if
Okay.
anybody, wants to.
Oh, there are, yes, resources at the end.
Yeah, a couple, 2 or 3 links that you provided. So that middle one there, the digital divide and educational equity, it really showed the huge difference in access between, along parental education and along family income. That's just really stark. So it's, anyway, thanks for putting this together. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item 11, district business. District goals. The district values the goals provided in our local control accountability plan, LCAP, and strategic plan. All of our district board agenda items are tied to these goals. 1 or more goals are listed in the description of each board agenda item. The details for each of those district goals can be accessed on our agenda online public page or by visiting the district website, www.pacificasd.org, under District Information, Board of Trustees. So, item 11A, the Panorama Student Survey and California Dashboard presentation. Mr. Lucy.
Okay, can I give you some introductory remarks, sir? So we are getting ready to kick off our LCAP family engagement sessions. We have 2 sessions planned. One is Friday morning and one is Thursday night. We may extend a 3rd one just because I think Friday morning will be very difficult for Ocean Shore families that are going on field trips. And I also think that it just extends it one more for more families to be able to come. We just have to figure that right time. And the very foundation of our LCAP is based on data. And so Will is going to make a measured presentation on the findings from our LCAP dashboard and our Panorama student survey. I don't believe that we've spent enough time sharing some of those details out loud, and we're doing some good work in Pacifica, and we want to make sure that folks know that. And so when we look at our data, following that, there will be time at the end for us to discuss kind of the direction of our goals. We will obviously always have academic goals, but I think there's some clear indications in the data of some needs. We'll talk about some social emotional needs. And so please enjoy the presentation and take it away, Will.
Thank you, Heather. As Heather said, this is the way this presentation will go. First, I'll be sharing some information with regards to the student perception survey. And then I will also share some general data around the California dashboard, specifically with regards to district-wide student group data. there's so much on the California dashboard. If you've been on it, there's so much information there. We could have 10 presentations on it and still not get through all of it. But the focus was more on our student groups, within our student groups. And then at the end of the presentation, you'll have time to discuss what you see. We'll have a series of findings that we came up with, but also it'll be a chance for you to have a discussion amongst the board around the data that you have seen, and then have an opportunity to give us direction towards our goals, because we'll be developing a new 3-year LCAP after all of our engagement, after we go through all of our engagement. So the student perception surveys is actually 2 surveys. They're 2 core surveys. They call it 2 core surveys. And Panorama does this for us. They do these surveys to thousands and thousands of districts across the country. And one of the surveys is a SEL skills survey, and SEL social emotional learning skills survey, and it really tells you, really measures how students perceive their own SEL skills, what's their perception of their own SEL skills under self-management, social awareness, growth mindset, and self-efficacy. And then the second survey, which the students take, is a climate survey, and that's with regards to the feedback that students have of their own school under the topics of climate of support for academic learning, sense of belonging, which is more of the school connectedness, safety, and then knowledge and fairness of discipline, rules, and norms. So the students that take this test, and there's actually 2 tests. There's a 3rd through 5th grade test that they refer to as the elementary one, and then there's the 6th through 8th grade test. But they both actually take the 2 surveys, the SEL core survey and the climate survey. And then what is this data is research based. The information that comes out of this is research based, and one of the questions is, why does student perception data matter? And the other one is, why can't I trust this data? Well, students' perception of climate and teaching are tied to the improvement of teacher effectiveness and positives of outcomes. We know that all students experience school, they don't experience school the same way. And it shows that student level of engagement and the relationship with their teachers are linked to achievement, belonging, and their likelihood of using these skills, those SEL skills, that are taught within the classrooms. So, and then why can't we trust it is the questions that these students answer on this survey are crafted and validated by leading experts, and like I said, and survey methodologists. But like I said, this survey is given out to thousands and thousands of districts. What does the research show with regards to students' perception of this data, and why does it matter? 62% of students report high engagement in school, are 62% less likely to fail. So that's one thing that what the research shows. And then students who feel connected to an adult at school report more than double their overall sense of belonging. And then these both together with regards to learning strategies, 74%, when students feel connected to their teacher, they are 74% more likely to use the strategies they learn more effectively. So giving this survey out to the students and collecting this data and understanding what this data is telling us does have does give us a good idea of what way we need to work with students, or what areas need to be a little more pointed out. Now I'm just going to share some highlights, and there's a lot. Again, there's a lot of data within the Panorama surveys, and I do want to also point out that this is the student survey. We also give a staff survey, which will be given probably at the latter end of February, and we also give a parent survey, and they are both core surveys. But these are really directed towards this particular student survey which we just gave out in the fall. We just administered in the fall. So in the summary section of the SEL core survey, we noticed that with social emotional skills for our third through fifth grade, we were at the 80th to 99th percentile compared to the national average. And as you can see up there, that's the green dot all the way to the right. So 3 of the 4 growth mindset was the only one that did not score as far as percentile compared nationally average. Second one was around safety, and our 6th to 8th grade students. There was an increase of 5% from the fall of 2018 to the fall of 2019, which is considered significant. So in 2018, you can see up there, it was 65%, and it moved for 6th to 8th graders, moved to 70%, telling us that they feel safe at school. And that's at the 60th to 79th percentile nationally. And then the question that was happening was for our 3rd to 5th grade students, does this school help all students be successful in school? Astounding 89% of the students responded positively to that question. That was probably one of the highest percentages of any of the questions on the survey to any of the students. So that was pretty telling. And then a few more highlights. A sense of belonging, which is one of our metrics in our existing LCAP. Around school connectedness, the comparison between our 3rd through 5th and our 6th through 8th. If you notice on the chart here, it shows that our 3rd through 5th, 80% of our students responded positively to a sense of belonging in general, and our 6th through 8th was 68%. But you also notice that as far as the national percentile compared to national percentile, our 3rd through 5th were at the 40th to 59th percentile within that range. While our 6th through 8th were at the 60th through 79th percentile. So that was an interesting data point there. And then, as far as growth mindset for our 3rd through 5th and our 6th through 8th graders, with those, they reported feeling, and I got the numbers here specifically, the question was around challenging myself won't make me any smarter. So challenging myself won't make me any smarter. Well, 52% reported not at all true. So they feel that challenging themselves will make them any smarter. And then 13% said it's a little true. And those two together make up the 65% that responded favorably in our 3rd through 5th. And then for our 6th through 8th, 58% said that statement is not at all true, and 17% said it's a little true, which made up the 75% of our 6th through 8th. If you notice that comparative to the previous year, our 3rd through 5th dropped 7%, while our 6th through 8th gained 5%. So that was another interesting point within the data that showed the data showed. So that was just some of the highlights from that, and now I'm kind of switching gears over to the California dashboard. And the first chart I want to show you is just the general California dashboard student group report for 2019. And as you can see there. The way it is that, I mean, you probably know this already, but I'm going to tell you anyway, that you get a color for each group, right? You get a color for each group within each, like chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, English language arts, and mathematics. And red is the lowest one, right? And orange is next, and then yellow, then green, and then blue. And you can tell the one blue that we have is, if reading the chart, is Asian, and it's mathematics. They're in the blue, right? But if you look at this chart just looking at the colors, you notice that there's a lot of orange and red under chronic absenteeism. That's kind of stands out for us. So that's one area that I thought that kind of stood out. But this is the general student group report.
Oh, can we go back to that?
Sure.
I just want to point out something else, that foster youth, homeless, American Indian or Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian or Pacifica Islander, Pacific Islander, not Pacifica, are none. And that makes me angry.
Yeah. So I have later on in this presentation, I actually was able to drill down to the numbers, because they only give a color if you have less than 31. They don't give you a color. You have to have more than 31 students district-wide within that group that are identified as as foster youth. You have to have more than 31 to get a color. You have to have 11 or more to get a number. So I actually later on in the thing, some of those groups will have a number because they have more than 11, even though they don't have a color. So you could still see if they increased from the year before, went down from the year before, and that's it. That's how it's kind of set up. So I understand your frustration with that, because it made me think, okay, I'm just going to drill down to the numbers, because they're not giving me any colors with these.
Well, we should also think of it as foster youth, homeless, American Indian, Native Hawaiian. Those are some of our highest risk groups of children. And if we're saying we're not, we're saying, okay, well, because there's not 31 of you, it's not important enough to put you on the metric.
Yeah.
So
Curious, African American is an orange on the suspension rate and chronic absenteeism, but then it's 9 for the mathematics and English language.
So the English language arts and the mathematics, they're tested 3rd through 8th, where the suspension and chronic absenteeism contains all grade levels, because those are the.
So they just made the numbers because.
So the groups are big enough, because it's K-8, the groups are big enough, but 3-8, it's not.
Okay. I was wondering.
I think we should also be clear that it's not Will who's suppressing
No.
this data. Okay?
We know.
It's the California Department of Education that has dictated that if you have groups that are less than 31 students, then you
Right.
can't draw any statistical
But it
conclusions.
does need to be noted that by saying none, we're, like, as an American Indian, I'm saying, okay, our kids are not important enough to be on this metric.
Well, I think what Will is saying is that he can drill down and get you at least the numbers for cell sizes that are bigger than 11, which will tell us something.
The other thing is, if I'm a parent who's going on the dashboard and I have foster youth and I see none, how are we getting that information out to those parents?
I think the concern is,
So
we're such a small district that it's a privacy issue
Yeah.
for their students. So if they don't show up as blue or green, then people can identify exactly who those students are.
And I understand that too, but just, we're board members and we have a lot of people who are community members in education, so they'll understand that. If I'm just a parent who's looking for a school district and, place to, go take my kids, and I'm like, none. I'm just saying what the perception is not good.
Yeah. And on the actual dashboard, I'll show you when I get to it. On the California dashboard, it does give the option to drill down to the numbers. They allow you publicly to drill down, so I'm not sharing anything that I created myself or
Yeah.
something like that.
No, and I
So
understand that.
They'll let you do that. It's kind of hidden. It'd be great if it was kind of out front, like here are the numbers.
But even that's subject to the FERPA confidentiality, which is the 11 cell size. Let me just say one other thing. One way to read this is column by column. So you noted that the first column, chronic absenteeism, is something that we should look at. Another way to look at it is the way that we've been looking at it up here is row by row. So I want to draw people's attention to English learners. Okay, that row I mean, there's nothing, suspension rate is in yellow, that's kind of the middle. We have orange for both ELA and math achievement, and chronic absenteeism, they're in red. Now, we also know that English learners tend to also be socioeconomically disadvantaged, so there's gonna be overlap in those. And that row there, orange, orange, yellow, yellow. I mean, we've got some work to do here.
Yeah.
We've got some serious work to do, and this type of grid can immediately tell you where you should be looking, at least for starters.
Yeah, and this grid just doesn't represent status, but it also represents change.
Yeah.
So that's a big kind of understanding that need to know. And later in the presentation, I'll show you the difference with the 5x5 chart, which is the next one. So we're looking at chronic absence indicators right here, and this is a 5x5 chart. And I'm going to take a little bit of time, if it's okay, to explain how this chart works. And you might know what it works, but I'm learning. Every single time I see this chart, I learn a little bit more about what this chart is telling us. So on this side, I'll try to use my arrow. Okay, there it is. This column here is status, right? So that is where the groups land in 2019 based off the data, right? And going across this way is progress, meaning compared to the year before, did they increase significantly, increase, maintain, decline, or decline significantly? Now, when we're talking about chronic absenteeism, do we want it to increase? No. We want it to decline, and we would love for it to decline significantly. So when we look at the student groups here, right, all the student groups that are here, we notice that our student groups are in this area, meaning that most of them are in this area, meaning that they're at the medium status, and they're at the increased in progress, right, compared to last year. Right? So all of our students who are in orange. So when you looked at that previous chart under chronic absency, all you saw was colors. But this really tells you a little bit more about where they are compared to the previous years. Because one of the things you look over here is, let's say, 2 or more races, right? They declined from the previous year. If they didn't decline from the previous year, they might have been yellow. Or they might have been orange, right, if they increased, right? So some of this is the colors change based on the progress from the previous year. And in some later 5x5 charts that I'll share, I'll show how even though some groups are at a very low status, they have made progress towards a higher status, and that needs to be noted. So anyway, this is just the general chart for chronic absenteeism, and there are 4 groups here that have a status level of high or very high and increased or increased significantly. And then there is anyway. So yeah, so that's for status. So then I took the same data, same information, and it's now these are the numbers for chronic absenteeism. So again, I'm going to explain the columns for you here. Here are the student groups, the first column. There's the color, which was also on the first chart that we saw. This is the status, again, status and change. So I said progress, but it's progress, status and change, right? So the status were very high, high, medium, low, low, and then the change, which is did they increase from the previous year or did they decline? So these again show that. And then this is the area where I sorted it. So I clicked, when I put this chart up here, before I copied it, I clicked on chronic absenteeism rate. And so this lists the chronic absenteeism rate from the highest chronic absenteeism rate to the lowest for our groups, right? And as you can see, there's a group, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, which didn't get a color, but had enough eligible students, which was 19, that they got a high status. and that's 4 out of their 19 students created this 21.1 chronic rate. And then this column here is the difference between the current to the prior. So this group used to be at 4.5, which is way over here. They used to be, previous year, that was their rate. They jumped to 21, so that was a 16.5% change. Now, I'm just explaining one column, but you understand how that works for all the other columns as we go down. And also, I just also want to point out is the current number of eligible and the previous year's number of eligible. See that, how that changed, 22 to 19? So there was less the previous year. For instance, down here, if you go to foster youth, you had 7 eligible, current eligible, right? And the prior year was 7. I'm wondering if it's the same 7. There we go. Any questions about that? And in this, you get a number. Again, if you have 11 students, if you have less than 11 students, you wouldn't get a number, which happened with some of the groups. And in suspension rate, so we're going to do kind of the same thing with this suspension rate. And the suspension rate, these 3 groups increased in their suspension rate, 4 groups maintained, and 3 groups declined. And again, suspension rate you want to decline, right? And you can see that by looking over on these columns here. You can see the 3 students, 3 groups that declined. You can see the 2 groups that maintained, and you can see the 1, 2, 3 groups that within this chart increased. We didn't have any that significantly increased, and we didn't have any that significantly declined. And then we go to the next chart. Tell me if I'm going too quick.
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
why are the number of enrolled students on the charts different for the same year?
On the chart, what, sorry?
So I'm looking at the current number of eligible students on the chronic absentee indicator. It's 710 for socially, economically disadvantaged. And then if you go to the next chart, the suspension rate indicator, it's 717. So why is it different?
Oh, there's a 7 student difference between the 2?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
And then it's the same thing, African American number of enrolled students, 37 in 2018-19. And when you go back up, current number of eligible students is 34. There's a difference in the numbers.
Okay, I know how.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're talking about.
So chronic, and I was sharing this with Heather. This is the thing that frustrates me. The chronic absenteeism, they take it from seabeds day to seabeds day.
Yeah.
So they take that number from seabeds day to seabeds day. Suspension rate goes from beginning of school year to the end of the school year. So they're on 2 different calendars. So at any given time during the year, because they're on 2 different times, you might not have the same number of students within that student group.
Okay.
To the extent that there are kids coming in and out of enrollment.
I actually had a conversation with a person at the California Department of Education because I couldn't figure out with my own numbers, and they said, yeah, that's the thing. So what's the report called? DataQuest. DataQuest collects them, and they have a schedule of when they collect that data. You know, when that report is collected, and it's based off that.
Unless you have huge enrollment swings, it's not going to make a ton of difference.
Yeah, but it makes a difference in the small amount.
Yes.
Students, the small amount of students, like the student groups,
Yeah.
small numbers, it
Yeah.
makes a
Yeah.
big difference in the indicators.
Sure, sure.
It's huge.
Yeah, because the percentage, the rate is completely different.
Because if we kept the 37 African-American students from year to year, then there would be no change in the chronic
Yeah.
absenteeism, because it's still 4 students each year.
Yeah.
So it makes it look worse than it actually is, because the previous chart is the same number of students that were chronically absent from last year to this year.
That was a good catch, Chris.
And so it was no increase, but on the indicator, it's saying it's an increase when it's not. And it's probably affecting the numbers. The same thing, I was looking at the differences between the enrollment versus the actual numbers of students missing school. And sometimes it's just more students or less, it's just the numbers are skewed. It's not, it's giving us a weird picture of what's really going on.
Yeah. And within each of the indicators too, you have 15 out of 749, right? 24 out of 717.
Yeah.
So there's less. I mean, that's
Is
why.
there any way we can do it like by ratio instead of by actual numbers? Like, so we can see what the actual change is instead of, doing it just on each number of enrollment each year? Because again, it gives us kind of a weird.
Well, when you look at this chart, you actually can look at it, we'll just take socioeconomically disadvantaged. You can actually look at this number and say 24 of 717 versus 15 of 749. I mean, that's just one example, I'm just pointing to the top one. But I mean, 17 of 838 and 20 of 851, you can see it, maybe the ones that are a little more dramatic, are a little more different, like 1,271 versus 1,287, that's, 17 more. 14 of 1,271 versus 12 of 1,000.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a more accurate picture portrayed. There's got to be a way to do it differently from this, because again, it's giving us a red or an orange indicator when really we haven't had any increase in absenteeism in some of the groups. Some of them have actually gone down, but the numbers of enrollment have changed, so.
Yeah, and it's gonna be far more sensitive the smaller the base, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's no way to get around it, unfortunately. I mean,
Yeah, but, I know we can't get around it on the dashboard, but we as a board need to know for ourselves, because if the dashboard is saying that these smaller numbers are jumping like this and they're not.
Right.
That's a problem for us, because it's not the truth. Like, we need to know what's really going on with our students. I understand the dashboard is not gonna change the way it does things, but we need to.
Yeah, it's all about interpreting the numbers
Yeah, we need to interpret the
that are here.
numbers better.
But that was a very good catch that you have, and a lot of people aren't gonna get that, but we can call that up. There's a pretty significant narrative section in our LCAP where we can call that out. It's like, this is what happens on the dashboard, but if you look at it, it's 4 students every year, and what's changing is the number of students that those 4 come from.
Yeah. The other side of that, and I just want to point this out, and I think is going to become a little more apparent as we go through, is our English learners. That we looked at our English learners, right? There is something, it's not necessarily in the suspension, but there is something to say that when they are maintaining the same suspension rate, they're still maintaining a fairly significant, like chronic absenteeism rate. And maintaining is at least not increasing, but it's still a significant, rate. And so I think that's where the value of the rate comes into it, is that even if you had 4 whatever student groups, and one of them was getting suspended, that's 25% of a student group that is being suspended. And if you have 100 and 25 of them are being suspended, that's 25% of a student group.
Right.
So I think there is a value to, even though the numbers are lower, you're still saying that's still 1 student. That's out of 4. 1 out of 4 students in that group are getting suspended. To me, and that's, I think, the English language learner piece. That's the thing that kind of stood out to me, was there's a significant amount that are chronically absent, and these are the significant amount of students that are not progressing on ELA or math. That, to me, is...
No, I definitely want to know those things, but I also want to make sure we paint an accurate picture of how our students are doing, especially if the chronic absences numbers not changing, but the student population is increasing or decreasing. So it makes that image changes. Like, yeah, we still need to take care of the 4,
But when you bring the numbers and I look at it on a chart and I'm looking at these indicators, I want to know, well, did we go from 4 to 6 students?
Yeah.
Or did we lose, did the numbers drop in our enrollment? And, that means something to me because that affects how the numbers are interpreted.
And then I would just like to point out again, we don't know foster youth, homeless, or American Indian or Alaska Native. It would be good to know if 50% of our foster youth were being suspended, or 60% of our homeless, or 20% of our American Indian.
Is that something
So,
we can, sorry.
My problem is we say we're doing this for every child, but we're really not. We're not really, we can't see the information.
Can we bring it in closed session? So we need to do this in closed session with all the numbers.
Yeah. And when we get down to the action level, like say for instance, we're looking at chronic absenteeism across all of our students, all the students that are chronically absent. This last year, we made a list of all those students who are chronically absent, whatever group they fell into, and said, what is your action plan at your site to not allow this to continue to happen? And I know many of the sites, I know Sunset Ridge in particular, did a lot of work around making sure that those students this year wouldn't be these chronically absent students. So within the actions of an LCAP and within the actions of what they do at their schools through their SIPSAs, we literally gave them the list at the school and said, these are your students that were chronically absent last year. What's your plan to make sure that that doesn't continue? And we obviously supported them, but that was drilling down to literally the student, no matter what group they were in, So, yeah, I totally see what you're saying about making sure that those students are identified and actions are brought to support those students.
But I think that it's great that you can drill down to the actual student and share that information with the principal or the administration of the school. But just for us, it would be nice to know, without breaking any privacy laws, what percentage of this group, what was, just to put a spin on it. Of course, they're such small groups that there are going to be huge swings from year to year, just based on that. I think the other thing that's really interesting is that because exactly which students are chronically absent, you can see which are kind of repeat or persistent chronically absent year over year.
Yeah.
Versus maybe it's kind of a new cohort that becomes chronically absent from year to year. So it's kind of like you put out that fire over here, but it's sort of sprung over there. Or is it really just the same core set of students you have to work on? So it would be good to fill in some of these blank cells. I don't want to say fill in some of these blank cells, but give us some descriptive stats that give us more information about the subgroups that we have no information on.
But I see the challenge in saying, if we were to say, okay, we have 8 students there and 4 of them are chronically absent.
Yeah.
Say, I know those 4.
Yeah, I think we'll try to figure out.
It is tricky.
Actually, can we say that in closed session is a great question?
Yeah, I don't know.
If you, as part of my evaluation, we look at all students, that can be discussed in that category, but it's not, we don't typically discuss individual student achievement in.
Well, I wouldn't, not individually, but want to see the numbers.
Yeah.
Like, we can't publicly share those numbers, but it's important for us to see what's going
So
on.
how about we do a little bit of investigation and see how we can get those numbers to you without having it be broadcast
Yeah,
all over. Not being secretive, being,
yeah. Well, we respecting the privacy of the students.
Well, it's abiding by federal law is what it says.
All right, so English language arts. So again, these are connected to the students who were 3rd through 8th grade in 18-19. And again, from this chart, you notice. One of the things that stood out here is that we had our students with disability were very low and increased as far as distance from standard. And I don't know, the next slide will show the numbers on that. And then all students were high and maintained. All of our students in English language arts were at high, but we maintained. So this one I sorted by current status, average distance from standard, from negative to positive. So I sorted it by the ones that, like students with disability, they were negative 74.4 standard from standard met. Average, their average was negative 74.4 from standard met. Now, it's interesting that they were the largest group, I mean, they were the farthest away from standard met, but they made progress in their change. They improved 12.4, so before they were 86.8 the year before, so they actually made progress. They made a positive change. African American and English language learners, well, African American, there's 25 within the current group and 21 previously. Those students averaged, they dropped from the previous year negative 16.9, so which made them land at negative 42.4, which they previously were negative 25. So that was something that kind of popped out there. Again, with our English language learners, we're maintaining, but we're low with a negative 1.5 difference. So we're basically around the negative 30s with that. Jumping. And then mathematics, we were at all the low status, so the ones that were low status here, right? Our students with disability and our students, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, were at increased significantly along with Hispanic, while again English learners were at maintained. And then if we look at the numbers there, we notice again that we have our students with disability were low and increased, but their level increased significantly from the previous year. They were at negative 107.4, and they were this last year negative 91.2. So again, although they were at a low status, they did make positive change comparative to the previous year. And again, same thing with the African American. They had a negative change. So they became farther away from the standard met average at a 61.9. Those are the two things I thought that stood out there. And again, English learners we see maintained, and there was just not much change between. Although they did make a tiny bit of a progress towards negative 37.8 within the math. And then the last piece within the California dashboard that I wanted to show was, and before I show it, I wanted to kind of explain how it works. Measuring the progress of English language learners, right? English learners. There are three different ways, or three different leveling systems, right? We have the English language development proficiency levels, which are merging, expanding, and bridging, and students fall into one of those three, right? Based off where they're at. Then there's the LPAC levels, and that's the assessment that replaced the CELT, and there are 4 levels there. There's beginning, which is level 1, somewhat developed, level 2, moderately developed, level 3, and well-developed, level 4. And then for the indicator on the dashboard, there's an English learner progress indicator, levels, and there's 6 of them. But the ELPI, or the English Learner Progress Indicator, that is the same as level 1 in the LPAC and emerging. Where it's different is level 2 is broken into 2 parts. ELP I2 low and ELP high, I2 high. And same with LPAC level 3. There's 2, that's broken into 2 parts. ELPI 4 is the same as LPAC level 4. So that's kind of how you look at those 3 things and how they make sense. Now, as far as how did we do, the arrow there shows the first 2, the top part of that bar, which is the 31.5 and the 3.7. Those are, the 3.7% are the ones who maintained ELPI level 4, meaning they were at 4 the previous year and they maintained it this last year. And then the purple are the ones that progressed at least 1 ELPI level. And that's where you want to be, where that arrow is. You want to be one of those 2, because the expectation is that English learner will gain 1 level within a year, ELPI level, right? And so this is really telling because it showed that almost 2/3 of our students are either not progressing a level in a year, or they're decreasing. 1/3 of them are, but 2/3 of them are not. So that, along with the other information that was shared in the other slides, is really telling them about our English learners. So I tried to summarize the findings that I saw within this. So I just wanted to kind of go over these, and then we'll move into if you want to have a discussion around this. So again, I just pointed out our English learners have not shown progress in English language arts and math, and 2/3 of them have either not progressed, and 2/3 of them have not progressed in our English language proficiency. Our students with disability have made positive gains, even though they're at the very low, not very low status, they're at low status. They've made positive gains, so there must be something that we're doing right, that we're progressing towards positive there. Our chronic absenteeism, as you could see from the first chart, and then when we drill down in the other charts, we have a lot of orange and red performance levels, and we have 5 groups that are at a high or very high status and are at an increased or increased significantly change, which is 2 areas you don't want to be in. Like that's. And then this suspension rate, there's 6 groups that are at a low, and increased for students who are African American, Asian, and socioeconomically disadvantaged. So those are just a summary of some of the findings from the data that was presented. Now I wanted to give you an opportunity to have a conversation around this, as Heather pointed out at the beginning, to kind of give us a little bit of a direction about where we need to really have our focus within our goals. So again, we have the opportunity to create goals, right? But our goals really should fall under three categories: condition of learning, pupil outcomes, and engagement, right? So our condition of learning would include basic service, state standards, and access. That's basically, what do students need, right? What are their basic needs for them to be available? We talked about digital divide. That could be within that kind of area of a goal. Pupil outcomes is how the achievement, and when I refer to other student outcomes, it's other student outcomes with regards to social emotional, not just student achievement within English language arts, math, within those core subject areas, but progressing as far as their teaching and learning, and problem solving, and computer skills, and those type of things. And then engagement is around school climate. How is the students' perception of engagement, or how are they engaging with each other? How are they engaging with the school? And this is not only just student engagement, but also parent engagement. And I have parent involvement, but I should have put parent involvement and engagement, because how are they engaging with their schools? How is the schools engaging with them? And then just general overall climate of the school. As we as we learned this week, we have a pretty solid climate over at Ocean Shore. They really kind of came together as a school, and that's huge. That's when a student walks into a school, or when anyone walks into a school, if they want to be there, if they are connecting with an adult, if they are feel value and purpose at the school, and feel valued and purposeful at the school, then that's a climate that we want to have. So those are our three kind of areas of where we would write a goal around those three areas. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to have a discussion amongst yourself, or ask me any questions with regards to any additional questions with regards to the data. I don't know if Heather, you want to add anything?
No, I think, obviously you don't have to put the metrics and you don't have to be specific detail, but as we discussed, there are some pretty obvious things on here. So who would like to start us off in terms of our student need?
Jesse's looking at me, I'll start. Well, the chronic absenteeism, I was really surprised. I mean, digging a little deeper on some of the schools that are experiencing this. So I think we already have a goal for that, but if it's not working, we need to switch it up and change it. That's the first one. And also math was kind of spotty in some schools. And also the suspension rate, focusing a little bit on that. For a couple years, we had the African American suspension rate stable, but now it looks like it's going up again. And then, my opinions about leaving blank spaces for certain groups. So finding a way to gauge how these higher risk groups are doing, even though we don't have enough of them. And I just want to make a point, we're never going to have enough American Indians because we're only 1.4% of the population. So, if I have to write a letter to somebody, I'll write a letter, I just don't know to who, that we need to figure out a way to gauge and to have indicators on how these students are doing, especially foster children who are extremely at risk. I mean, by the time they turn 18, 50% of them are going to be incarcerated. So, I just truly believe that leaving the blanks is not acceptable. And so we, as a superintendent, board, and admin need to figure out a way to keep those gauges, have it trickle down to the teachers so that they're keeping numbers on all these different groups that we have no numbers for, or blank spots. These kind of reports, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be like I'm frustrated, but I am, because they're leaving, parts of our population out, and that's not acceptable. And so that would be my recommendations. Okay.
I agree with you. I am concerned about the chronic absenteeism. I'm also concerned about academically how our students that we don't know what's going on, but African Americans, socially economic disadvantage. I also want to see how the fluctuations in enrollment are affecting the numbers. That bothers me, that it's saying we're increasing in some things, that the number is not actually increasing, it's decreased in enrollment, that's making the number seem larger. I want to see something to kind of give us a better picture. On top of that, I do want to see the numbers. I feel like there's a way that the board, maybe we have to sign something that says we will not disclose it or whatever, but we need to know, we need to see it. So that's really important. I agree with you.
I think even if we didn't see the numbers, but the percentage only
of the numbers, even if it's a percentage of the numbers,
would be an indicator.
Yeah, something. And the test scores with the math and the English language, I feel like we can do better. I just do. I feel like we have to figure something out. I'm not sure what that is, but it bothers me quite a bit. So.
I mean, they covered so much, but we started working on suspension rates a lot, focusing on that a few years ago. And I thought we'd shifted over a lot to using Star Vista and recommending the families go to counseling, and even some of the students that are too young to be suspended, stuff like that, but by recommending family counseling instead of, or in addition to. Has that fallen by the wayside, or is that
No.
still happening?
It's still happening. They're still doing, our rates are.
So the rate's
low.
going up even though we
If
have
you
that
went-
in place?
If you went to like 15, 16 through
Mhm.
now, in fact, there's through San Mateo County, there's a new way of looking at it over more years than just 2.
Mhm.
They have a little thing, they're still working on it, but that should be really interesting to see. But
Because it seems like it was going down, but
Yeah.
now it's popping back up, so.
it's more, I think it's, the suspension rate's more of maintaining right now. It's, on the average, it's maintaining, which makes me think of an idea about the numbers piece. We have low numbers. What if we look countywide? Because we would have more than 11 foster youth, and we could look at countywide and make a metric or a goal around the countywide one, because we're part of the county. You know, and that would be inclusive. Yeah. Anyway, but that was just thinking. I'm already thinking
My fault.
solutions. I
Okay.
should wait. But yeah, they're.
It seemed like the counseling was really helping,
Yeah.
at least for a while. And that's something, that's a service that the families, probably wouldn't go out on their own, or couldn't afford on their own, or wouldn't have access to. So I think that's something we need to,
We,
just to push more.
yeah, we have, go ahead.
I just have a little like to add to that. We did lose some of that counseling this year. I think it was the Star Vista piece, they couldn't renew their contract with us because they,
YSB, actually.
or was it YSB? One of those two. They couldn't.
They don't have enough
They don't have
interns.
enough interns, and they need to have their interns placed in districts where they can pay a higher fee. So we lost that contract. I've been kind of staying in touch with them to see if we can revisit it for the coming year. But it's a little early now to predict that for next year, but we're definitely going to try and keep that in touch. The other thing is that we've been working internally a lot on building an infrastructure around kind of trying to build supports within the district for students who are chronically absent or frequent discipline issues and so forth, so that we don't have to send them directly to the county for SARB, that we can do something in the interim. And that's slowly building up, but we still have a long way to go on that. It's just not something we've been able to focus on a lot. But it's beginning, it's at a beginning stage.
So one thought on trying to, a second best solution that I think would probably fly legally, but it's the second best solution, is we could try to aggregate some of these subgroups that have fewer than 11 students and then come up, so we'd have a, almost an other, which would include the Native Americans and Pacific Islanders, until we got to that critical mass that it could be reported and we could get numbers. Of course, it's mixing and matching, so you don't have the individual subgroups, but it's better than having no information, right? So it's a second best solution.
None or another.
I don't have too much to add to what everybody else has said here. I mean, I've been concerned for a while about our more marginalized subpopulations. I think that there's a lot of work to do. I think that it's pretty clear. I think English learners is a great place to start. They seem to be suffering. They're at best, they're static. They're maintaining a very low status, as opposed to, say, our special education, which is a low status, but they're improving more than other groups. They have a lot more opportunity to improve. So right, so to speak. I guess one of the things that would actually help me, because everything that we've been presented today is really focused on Pacifica, but we have no benchmark against it. I mean, with respect to the panorama, yes, we have the national distribution, right? But with respect to the dashboard results, it would be really interesting to see how we are comparing to our peer districts. And that would help put this into perspective a lot.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's going to be some districts that look like us with respect to our needs and are doing worse, and others that are doing better. And then the next question is, well, what are they doing? You know, how can we learn from them? So I guess that's sort of all I have to say.
Yeah, I did want to point out that, you know, developing this, obviously, you tried to show what could spur this discussion, but what it spurs at looking at more at it, right?
Yeah.
So I should point out that chronic absenteeism across the county and across the state is more orange and red than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So it's not just Pacifica that's doing that.
Sure.
That's not an excuse, because if you're missing 18 days of school every single
Sure.
year, it's not good,
Sure.
no matter where you're at. It is that way. But I mean, there are charts and data and stuff out there that can compare it to other districts, other states. I just got off the phone with a colleague from the county office saying that she was impressed with how well we were doing in certain areas in comparison to other
Sure.
districts within this county.
Sure.
And I said, chronic absenteeism? She said, no, not that one. But she was interested to see what was going on and, you know, what had changed or done differently or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, but yeah, that could be another full.
But I mean, in particular, looking at those districts that look like us with respect to needs, have similar incidences of students in these various subgroups, yet they're doing better than us, that could help us think about what our benchmark or what our goal should be, at least a long-term goal,
Yeah.
right? And then we can try to plan on you know, we're going to do a three-year LCAP, right? So we can sort of try to get on track there. The other thing that I think would be really helpful, more for you guys than for us, but is to look at the variation across schools. Because right now we're looking at district averages. And, you know, there are going to be some schools similar to analogous to what I'm saying about as a district, we should look at other districts that are similar. We have some schools that look more similar with respect to their needs, and they might be doing differently in terms of their outcomes and their practices, and what can they learn from one another. And so I would urge you to dig a little deeper there and look at the variation across schools in some of these metrics.
Yeah, I'm working with each of the schools in creating their kind of, with regards to this, their kind of deal with regards to this, but some of our administrators and staff have already done the work. Like, bring Ortega up, for example. He's gone through all of his dashboard data, and he can tell me, you know, like, these are the areas that are standing out within the dashboard, within just their school.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's similar, but you're right. There are some schools that are performing better at certain areas, while the other schools are not performing there. So, you know, that's the nice thing about Pacifica, is that we get together enough that we can talk about the differences and what are you doing at your site that's getting this.
It's exactly what you have to do. So
As superintendent, I'd love to just kind of point out that English learners, as Jesse said, on the dashboard student group along all four indicators, that they were the lowest of each of the groups, right? They had the red for chronic absenteeism, yellow for suspension, and then orange in English language arts and math. And so that's about 220 kids, which is a very manageable number. But also, if you look at the English language acquisition results, only 5% more made 1 year's worth of progress than made one level's worth of progress or maintained at the highest level than lost a level. And so that was not very much net gain on that end. So to me, that seems like one of the most obvious places to start, is that it's a manageable amount. I know for a fact that relative to other districts, we do not do well in our groups of English learners. So I think that seems like a very easy first focus. So. Anything else before we move on? Thank you for your close attention to those details.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Lucy. Okay, so 11B, acceptance of 2018-2019 audit report. LCAP governance, Ms. Peterson.
Okay, thank you. This is bringing to tonight the 2018-2019 audit report, and Matt Oyeda is here from Siobhan and Associates to summarize the audit report and answer any questions that you might have tonight.
Hi, thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. Today I'll be mentioning some of the key highlights from our financial audits and the financials and the results. So for the net position, increased by 1.26 million to a deficit net position of 900,000. For the fund financials, the general fund's ending balance was 4.2 million. And for the governmental funds, there's an increase of 24.6 million. The main increase for the governmental funds was due to the bond issuance. For the general funds, the 3-year change, there's a decrease by 211,000. The general fund reserve was 6% of total general funds outlay, which met the required and recommended 3% for districts of similar sizes. The results from our audit is there was no exceptions. We had an unmodified opinion. There were no material weaknesses noted. There was no significant passes on adjustments, no disagreement with management, and no findings. Any questions about the audit or the financials?
I have no questions. I mean, it's very objective. I just, I can always ask you your opinion about, the financial, your opinion of our financial health, but I don't think that that's in your contract to talk about.
Well, you can kind of see it if you looked at the government-wide financials, the statement of net position, that shows that school district whole financials. So right now they have a negative net position, but that's mainly due to the new accounting pronouncements. So there's introduced in 2018, fiscal year 18, introduced GASB 75, which required all government entities to present their total other post-employment liabilities. So that changed from GASB 45, which government entities were only required to report the required annual amount. So now they have to post the whole liability for all employees receiving other post-employment liabilities. Also with GASB 68, that required government entities to report total pension liabilities, so both PERS and STIRS. So all school districts are struggling with these new accounting pronouncements. So in terms of the long term, it might be an issue. For short term, the fund financials are looking great. The general fund is meeting its required 3% reserve. The fund financials have a positive fund balance. So short term, the school district's looking in a good. Long term, maybe in 15, 20 years, just because of these accounting pronouncements and the new requirements to pay other post-employment liabilities and pension liabilities might be an issue.
Out of your clients, what's the average reserve?
For average reserve for the general fund, it is roughly about 5 to 10%. So the requirement from the California Department of Education is 3%. So it's meeting that, and it's 3% for the general fund.
Average elementary school district in California has a 17% reserve.
Thank you for looking at that statistic.
So feeling the pinch here a little bit. We're feeling like we're cutting it a little close. But anyway, that's, I know that we check the box and we're fine. We're meeting.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for having me again.
Thank you.
So we have to do it formal acceptance.
Oh, okay. So, do I have a motion to accept the 2018-19 audit report?
I'll make a motion to accept the 1920 audit report,
18-19.
or 1819, sorry.
Yes,
19.
we're not there yet. And do you have a second?
I can Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Board passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are to item 11C, the SARC reports, School Accountability Report Card, and we are back to Mr. Lucy.
Yes, so what I present to you is a recommendation for approval of our SARC, Student Accountability Report Cards for Pacifica School District, Cabrillo, Ingrid B. Lacey, Linda Moore Educational Center, Ocean Shore, Ortega, Sunset Ridge, and Valamar. I do want to make one point in that the PFT scores, you know what that stands for? Physical Education Test scores, were not part of the document that you received because they weren't released by California Department of Education until yesterday. But they will be a part, and they're just pure data. It's pure data. There's no narratives or anything. They will be part of the ones that will be submitted. DocuTracking is going to submit it for us. They will be inclusive of those PFT reports, but that's really the only thing that's different from what you saw.
Okay. Thanks. Do we have any discussion or questions on the SARCs?
No, I don't.
Okay, I guess, one question that I have on those, all of the fits are from 2018, like December 2018. So when are the next fit assessments going to be? And I can't remember what the acronym stands for.
Physical inspection.
Facility inspection. Yeah, it's for facilities.
So what's hard about the SARC is some sections are 2018 and they tell you very specifically, and then some are the most current ones. And so we probably have a more current fit that we used in our LCAP.
Okay, because I was under the impression that was the most recent one that we had.
No.
So the only fit item that really struck out to me was something about like wings B and C at LMEC, and the floors needed work there, and that was a poor rating. But it was from a fit report from December 2018, which is well over a year ago now. So I'm not sure if that's already been corrected or not.
Well, this is my understanding, and Heather, tell me if I'm off here, but my understanding is that the reports that were in there are the most recent fit reports that were done. There is a range of time that you have to have them in, that they're inclusive of it, but normally there is either that fit report was done by a company.
Yes, through the facility master planning, we hired a professional.
Yeah.
The facility master plan that was done, and so it was very in-depth look, and
Sure.
that's why they were so without a proper word, nitpicking at a lot of things.
Sure.
But they fitted within the fit report template, right?
Okay.
To get it. But it was within the time frame so that it would be inclusive of this particular report. But normally that fit report is done every single year. So sometime at the beginning or during the summer, or I don't know when they do it, but they actually will go through and and do the report.
Sure.
It won't be as intense and specific as
the one for the master plan?
But it was done within the frame of time that would be inclusive of this report.
Okay. Do we know if any work was done? I mean, at LMEC in terms of their floors?
Nothing extensive.
Okay,
Those
just
are, the
wondering.
B and the C wing are not the wings that we've occupied.
Yeah.
But now that we've had
We'll get 'em back.
turnover, Spectrum has done some work on their area.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I mean, that was
Yeah.
one of the things that kind of jumped. I don't want anybody falling through any
Right,
floors. So. Okay, any other discussion on the SARCs? They were pretty straightforward. And thanks for letting us know about the PE stuff, because they were sort of blank boxes.
Yeah.
All right. So there's an action item,
To
yeah?
approve.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the SARC reports?
I'll make the motion.
In a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Board passes 4-0. Thank you.
All right. Item 11D, Human Resources Update, LCAP Goal Number 1, Ms. Gavidia.
Yes, well, in the fall, we decided that we were going to have this standing item on the agenda so we could provide you with a regular update. I'm happy to tell you that as of this week, actually as of last Friday, we have filled all our special ed vacancies albeit with contracted teachers, but that's probably at this time of the year, that's probably the best option. So that's very exciting. We had 2 new teachers, lovely ladies, start today, and they're as thrilled to be here as we are to have them. So it was a good start. And then we have a couple of more starting over the next few days and into next week until they're all filled. So we're busy helping them get acclimated and getting their caseloads assigned and helping them kind of get launched. So that was very exciting. But our job is not done. Of course, the ultimate goal is to hire our own staff. So this gives us a little breather and allows us to now shift our entire focus to that as we begin the new hiring season, right after the midwinter break. So we're very excited that we can use our energies towards that end for the remainder of the school year. And if you would like, we will continue to update you at every board meeting or every other, whichever, whatever suits you, we will do that.
That'd be great. So what's the probability if one or more of these contracted special education teachers really work out, that they transition to permanent staff?
Well, we actually have that situation has come up in at least one of our placements, that someone who's been with us since September and really likes it here, and he's really well liked and he's doing a good job. So each agency has a little different way of writing a non-compete component into their contract. So on a case-by-case basis, we'll have to kind of get some legal guidance about when we want to, is there a way we can work around that? I think that implementing a non-compete clause in California is very difficult to do. It's one of the few states that doesn't really recognize them.
Okay.
So we have to but we still have to work around the language in the contracts.
Sure.
So we will in most cases.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to say, when I was reading the superintendent's report, weekly report, I don't know where I was. I was out, and when I read that, I just went, like joy, because it's been such a challenge, so if we know what we did this time, hopefully we can, just keep building on that, just to try to prevent, a crisis, again. But I'm not sure, how you or Alexa, how that went.
So I'm not in any way, I worry about us not celebrating this enough because it gets buried under the ocean shore flooding piece of this, but this is really, this is a huge piece for us. And a couple things that is that every single contractor that we knew, Maria and Alexis just called, right? And, they got lots of no's, lots and lots of no's. Somebody that said, sure, I'd love to work there, I'll commute from Sonoma. And then as soon as they get, that information and recognize that they can't do that. So they got as many no's as they did yeses, but it was just going after yes, yes, yes. There is kind of a seasonal aspect to it. People changed jobs, but there was a very concerted effort to get those filled.
I also want you to know that we didn't just take every yes that came our way either. We wanted to there were some that we just knew weren't going to work out, even that it was better for us to keep looking than to take somebody that wasn't a good fit. So we wanted to be as selective as we could without being arrogant about it. So.
And I think just as we had talked about, one of the RSPs requesting taking an administrative position in another district and not being able to accept that resignation, and we even got that position filled. And so for all of our employees, we want them to move up in their careers and have that opportunity, and it was very difficult to say, no, not until we can find your replacement, which really means we have to replace these 4 other people over here. And so to get that was even more than we ever expected. I did some legwork around talking to people of school services in California, and I said, so we're negotiating, and you always want to talk about, what's the incentive that brings people here that wouldn't go to, from your neighboring district, that kind of thing. And they said, you can always offer $1 more, but what people are really looking for, and special ed teachers have the opportunity to be choosy about, is a cohort of teachers and knowing that they will have that support when they get in the classroom, that they're going to grow, that they're going to have professional development, that, you know, if there's an issue, that they've got a responsive administrator, they've got, you know, a responsive district office. And she said, doesn't matter what you offer as the extra incentive. Clearly, it's a competition thing, but the bottom line is growing your program from within and making sure that people say, oh yeah, you know, I want to be there, so that they choose you. That was pretty interesting. So I just applaud Maria, I applaud Alexis. It's great, we're in, exactly as Maria said, we're in great position right now, which allows us to focus on next year and really being able to hire our own folks so that we can build that cohort of teachers.
Well, I just wanted to just say I was really happy. I think I was in Starbucks.
Okay, so that was not an action item. Moving on to 11E, or unless, is there any more discussion? Sorry. Okay. 11E, network infrastructure upgrade, LCAP goals, goal 1, operations. Mr. Lucy.
Yes, it is recommended simply that the board approve $389,055.52 to AMS Net for network infrastructure upgrade equipment. Now, I hope this is okay, but Nelson Cindino is here, and he'd probably be helpful in answering any questions that I possibly can't around this. But this procurement is inclusive of an E-rate that we received, and so this is just a request to actually go ahead with the purchase order.
Is there discussion?
Isn't this what we talked about earlier in the year? Okay.
Yeah, the money that we hadn't previously applied for, that digital advisors supported us in.
So I mean, my understanding is that a majority of this was eligible for E-rate matching funds, and then there was some ineligible, and I think the line item was sort of some equipment for the district was mostly ineligible. And so all of this looks fine. I totally admit that I was lost reading through a lot of this, okay? But one of the things I just didn't understand is there was some contract, and it was talking about, it was a quote from Infinity or something, and it was talking about, we noticed that there was, the district had equipment without a license, and LMEC had a license without equipment or something like that, and so I'm not really sure what to make of all that. I didn't really understand what was going on there, but do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
They were referring to the Meraki equipment.
Yeah.
Meraki is a brand of the network equipment that all of our Wi-Fi devices run on, and in order for it to work, it's cloud-based, so a license has to be associated with it. So it was probably that a piece of equipment failed, and we replaced it, and at the time, we were waiting for a license, the accompanying license, to arrive for it to work.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so something like that.
Okay, and then there's sort of the opposite case, because there was
Exactly.
one equipment without license, and then there's another license without equipment or something
Right.
like that. Okay, my only concern is that they said our quote that we're giving you, it sets it up exactly the same way with those assumptions, so I'm not sure.
So we worked with digital advisors, representatives from Cisco,
Okay.
Infinity, and myself. We all worked together to scrutinize our network and replace exactly the outgoing equipment with the latest models.
Okay.
In addition, when we did get this network back in 2015, the main purpose of it was to accommodate the Wi-Fi devices that were going to be administering the smarter balance test, and at the time it was only 4th through 8th grade, so that meant we only put access points from 4th through 8th grade, and every other physical room had access points from kinder to 3rd grade. So of course there's a lot more devices, and this quote and this replacement project will equip every single room with an access point. So classrooms will not have to share an access point with a neighboring room, which will cause a lot of drop-offs.
Yeah, okay. What's the longevity of this equipment?
5 years is a
5
typical lifespan for a piece of network equipment. And we kind of got lucky when we applied for our E-rate Category 2 funds, because this model of access point just got replaced with Wi-Fi 6, which has a lot more bandwidth throughput and more radios, so it handles like drop-offs a lot better. It greatly reduces that and allows for a lot more devices to connect to the access point.
Great, great. So we'll be set for at least 5 years.
Yes. The other part of it, the ineligible part of that bond was for the servers. E-rate Category 2 only gives discounts for network infrastructure such as the wireless access points and Ethernet switches, fiber optic media converters. A lot of that project consists of replacement servers that we got back in 2010 when we switched from our DOS-based SIS Synergy. Synergy replaced SASE, which was a DOS-based SIS. And we went in with a couple of other districts who also went with Synergy, and those need to be replaced. We've kind of upgraded it as we need to by adding more RAM to those servers and adding another storage array, but those are long overdue for replacement.
Okay, great. And those are ineligible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
But since we were buying so much equipment from Cisco Meraki, they gave us a discount.
Good deal, okay.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
you're welcome.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, let's put this to the vote then. Do I have a motion to approve the procurement for $389,055.52?
I'll motion to approve.
And second?
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Board passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you for your approval.
All right. Item 12, board bylaws, board policies, and administrative regulations. Goal governance. Ms. Cadidia.
Okay, we'll get these going. There's quite a few, and it's kind of a mishmash of different policies and regulations, so I'll do my best to be concise. The first one, 4116, board policy and administrative regulation, pretty much has to do with the probationary and permanent status of personnel. And the important thing was to make sure it aligned with our collective bargaining agreement, and it does. So you can feel comfortable approving that one. I did want to point out, though, that we do have a typographical error. We can bring this back to you if you would like at the next board meeting for the administrative regulation AR 4116A. The first paragraph is the one that should not be stricken. That's the one that we want to adopt, the one that says permanent status districts of 250 ADA or more. I think it was just a clerical error. So that whole paragraph should not be stricken. The rest of it should be stricken because that applies to districts that are smaller than ours. And then, but as you go on to page 2 and forward, everything else there is the way we want it to be. And that one. Do you have any questions about that? Would you like us to bring it back next time without the strike-throughs?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
I catch up.
Yeah, I just caught it just before. Okay. Then onward to BP 4119, 4219, and 4319, having to do with the dressing and grooming of staff. This is one that actually we just recently had updated, but the language has changed again just a little bit to include the yellow highlight down below about hairstyle and hair texture and so forth. That we are not allowed to discriminate around that on any basis, religious or otherwise. So there's that one. Then the next 4216 and has to do with the probationary and permanent status at this time of classified personnel. Now, the way this one appears here in draft form is correct. There aren't any clerical errors there. And again, it's aligned with our contract, so they complement each other. Let's see, discipline, suspension and disciplinary action also having to do with classified personnel, 4218. There isn't any significant change with what was in previous policies. It mostly speaks to the whole Skelly process, which we hardly ever, if ever, have to implement. But it's good to know how to do that, just in case. And then the following, or AR 4218, is the complementary regulation for that same disciplinary action for classified personnel. No significant changes there. Any questions with that next batch? Okay. This next one has to be Board Policy 5131A, has to do with student conduct, and this outlines the prohibition of conduct, student conduct that endangers self or others. That includes, discrimination, harassment, bullying, cyberbullying, all of those things that are behaviors that we are not acceptable in the school setting. The one, I think, difference that I noticed here, I don't know if you noticed it on page 3, refers to the use of devices in an unauthorized manner at school. I think that was not previously spelled out, and it is now.
So I have a question actually on page 2, because there's a strike out there saying the district shall not be responsible for students' personal belongings which are brought on campus or to a school activity and are lost, stolen, or damaged. So are we now saying that the district can be held responsible? And I just read through that. It sort of came out of the blue, to tell you the truth, because it was under item 5, which says damage to or theft of property belonging to students, staff, or the district. I'm not even really sure why it was there, to tell you the
Why
truth.
it's there, and what's the implication of it being taken out?
Yeah. So that was my only question actually on all of these.
I could do some research on that.
Okay.
And bring it back. Would you like that?
Sure.
Okay.
If it's not too much trouble.
No, I think it'd be interesting. Onward to
I mean, do you have any?
No, I don't.
dressing and grooming. So same, are you still back on that one? You want
We were just going over what
something
I
else?
just mentioned,
Okay. This is Board Policy 5132. Now it's dressing and grooming having to do with students, same language as with the staff, having to do with hair texture, hairstyles, and other grooming. We cannot discriminate against that. And lastly, this is kind of a random one that just appeared. AR 5141 having to do with regulations around TB testing for students coming in, and for students who come to our attention because they've gone through the health department system, and so they're flagged, and how we're expected to handle those upon enrollment. Very important for containment of illness.
this doesn't have anything to do with this, but do we have any people who are refusing to vaccinate their children?
A couple, it's dwindling now that, a couple of years ago, it changed that you had to do it for a very specific reason and not just because you wanted to. There was a doctor, a physician locally who was kind of just signing letters just upon request. And that practice has diminished. We haven't seen any of those letters recently, so that's a good thing. And I think that's it. There's quite a few. Any questions about any of them? Pretty routine.
Yeah, I was satisfied with the tuberculosis one. It was, I mean, it has this one paragraph that sort of says, oh, somebody could refuse to be tested, and I was going, uh-oh, and then all of a sudden, we have a lot of latitude well, the superintendent or her designee has a lot of latitude.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And so we will bring those two back.
Okay.
So, and the others will go through consent, and then the other two will bring back the 12th of February.
Okay. So we're at item 13, future agenda items.
The biggest future agenda item that we have is by March 1st, we have to get approval of the comprehensive school safety plans, and with some of the recent thinking around law enforcement is that we discussed that in closed session, and Officer Clements came last time, so we will do that and then approve them in open session after a general presentation on our comprehensive school safety plans. We have had the opportunity to use some of those this year, and so we're getting more and more familiar with that. Are there any requests for other future board agenda items? We have a busy February and March.
I think I would like to see, maybe there's been changes, let me think which one it is. 51-4. It's the one about law enforcement and the interaction that we have with families.
Okay.
And it's been about 5 years since we've reviewed that. I can't remember the exact number, 5145.
I can check with you too.
Yeah, something.
Okay. We will bring that to February. Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I'm adjourning the meeting at 9:10.